Okay, it's like 4, so I'm gonna mute myself. Let's take over.
Sure. Okay, let's get started. So welcome to the CNS talk on this, what's today, Wednesday?
Okay, it's like 4, so I'm gonna mute myself.
Hang on. You're talking
Let's
somewhere.
take over.
Sure. Okay, let's get started. So welcome to the CNS talk on this, what's today, Wednesday?
Okay, it's like 4, so I'm gonna mute myself.
I hear
There is a loop. Go ahead.
Take over.
Sure. Okay, let's get started. So welcome to the CNS talk on this, what's today, Wednesday?
Okay, it's like 4, so I'm gonna mute myself.
I hear
There is a loop.
There's a loop.
Take over.
Sure. Okay, let's get started. So welcome to the CNS talk on this, what's today, Wednesday? Okay, wow. There was a forever loop. Here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, that's a new one. Anyways, welcome to the CNS talk. It's my absolute pleasure to have Flavio Dell'Acqua with us today because we've been working together. I think we're close to 20 years at this point on all things tractography, and he does a fantastic job explaining what tractography is, how it works in terms that even psychologists understand it by using references like Smarties and donuts a lot of the time, which is greatly helpful. Flavio has a background in biomedical engineering from the University of Milan and did join us at King's for his postdoc, I believe, in the early days, and has stayed at King's since then, moving up the ranks to being a reader, or for the non-UK folks, an associate professor. He's also, or used to lead the diffusion group at the ISMRM, and is now the, what's the fancy title for the society? Vice chair or something? You're muted, Flavio.
I'm currently vice president.
Vice president, even better. And today we're going to hear about all things tractography, really, and also the future and exciting new things happening in the next couple of days. So Flavio, without further ado, please take it away.
Okay, so let me start the presentation and see if I go in the right screen. Okay, and then I already lost everything. Good. Okay, share. Where is it? Yeah, desktop 2. Share. Great. Can you see the screen? Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so yeah, I tried to prepare a general talk about tractography and brain connectivity research. I was trying to come up with something original, and then I found an old post from Anastasia Yendicki on some symposium they did. I think what's going on? Okay, they did yeah, pretty much last year, and it was funny because she organized this kind of mesoscale imaging symposium at the MGH. I don't know if you know about MGH, is the place where they're doing the Connectome 2. They have a lot of research on post-mortem imaging, animal work. So they're really pushing the limit for mesoscale imaging. But the funny thing is, if Jeff Lieberman was invited and he made kind of a burning of entire field, he mentioned that effectively what we're doing with neuroimaging today is not really connectome, no connectomics, but it's more like looking at mere projectomes. I really like the statement, and it made me think quite a lot about what is the meaning of that. So first of all, I'm going to tell you what I think Leachman is meaning with his projectome versus connectome. And this is mostly based on his paper they wrote a few years ago on the rise of projectome. And essentially, I guess everyone knows Leachman, but he's the inventor of Brainbow. He's working a lot with the super high resolution axonal tracing, really want to map connectivity at the highest possible resolution. And for him, projectome means large-scale connectivity. So I say we want to see how different parts of the brain are connected. And most of his work is done on animal work, but he's also trying to, or he's already doing something in the human side. On the other hand, for him, connectome is more more specific, is going down to the individual neural circuit. They really want to look at precisely the synaptic connectivity, etc. And clearly, if we talk about MRI, there is no way we can look at this. And in a way, I understand also his approach. Say the projectome, if we just look at the lower scale without looking at the cortical connectivity, was something already feasible today. But if we look at more cortical connectivity, cortical circuit, it's something more challenging. Of course, this distinction is really valid also for MRI. No way we can get to the cortical circuit. But I think there is another level that actually that's where I start thinking more about this. When we talk about projectome, I also automatically start to think about other projections of different connections. So, and when we talk about connectomics, in reality, when you talk about structural connectivity, brain connectivity, call as you like, in reality, we are not really looking at connectivity itself, but we're only looking at how different regions are connected together. And in this case, I would kind of agree with Lichman that we're not really looking at a connection here. We're looking at more the endpoint. And in that case, I probably, I agree. This is what we're doing. We're doing projectomy most of the time. And this makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know if this is the right term, but it makes me think that we need to do better in this field. And for two main reasons. The first one is we are not really original with this kind of representation, because already back in the 1310, someone, probably a monk in a church, already invented this kind of graph, brain graph and connectivity using the Galen theory or the ventricular theory, where the liquid across ventricles moving are generating our thoughts. I don't want to criticize the connectomics with that, but I was just thinking sometime I'm kind of I have a nightmare thinking about what will be, how people will consider our research today in 100, 200 years from now. Are we going to be smile with in the same way we smile at this picture, or is our work going to be say, no, actually that was a fundamental step forward? So that's one thing that make me a little bit uneasy on just looking at termination. But the second thing is also, if we look at if we go back in time, in a way, if we look at how connectivity started, if we look, for example, mine and Wernicke Association School, you can see that the main focus was specifically the fibers. We have the association fiber, commissural fiber, projection fibers. You all have the general neuroanatomists, probably Steffi know a lot more than me on that. They were focused on understanding what the actual pathway, the pathway of this track. And of course, when we look at Wernicke disconnection syndrome, we can see that the main focus again is to identify where is the region, but more important, what kind of path has been disconnected. It's not just the termination, the main point. The key is actually the fiber. And looking at pathways is hard because, I don't want to go in comparing our localization school and association school. Is more about say that when you look at a cortex, you can do a histology, you can look at microscopy, you can see clearly what the different cortical organization. But when you want to look at a macroscale network, everything is becoming more difficult. And here, for example, if we look in what people were doing in the past, where of course they're doing different postmortem dissection. First, they were using RAM or different alcohol solution. Then we moved to Klinger dissection, or Dejenin was actually doing slicing and staining to identify malaria degeneration on the path. And these are clearly, as I said, postmortem dissection, destructive technique. And they were kind of limited because they can only see one or two tracks at a time, and you cannot undo with your, like we do today with the software if they made a mistake. So it was kind of very time consuming and very difficult to do this kind of analysis. On the contrary, over time, we started to use a little bit more and more animal models. We started with the cortical lesion, then we also introduced axonal tracing, and then we have all the electrophysiology with that have been done to look, for example, at the columnar organization, the visual receptor field, etc. There has been a lot of work done on the animal model, but as you know, this is a slide I use so many times, is there is a big discrepancy about what we can see in animal model and human. And this was actually what's been described by Francis Crick and Edward Jones in 1993. It was a commentary, essentially it was a call to army to say, guys, we need something better. What we are doing in the monkey, what the research we're doing cannot be translated in the human, and it's different to look at things like, for example, language. How can you study language in animal models? It's becoming is a difficult things. That was 1993, and around the same time, there was a new technique that started becoming more and more prominent. It was the diffusion weight imaging. It's an MRI technique able to map the mobility of water in living biological tissue. And I would say this is probably one of the, I would talk about inflection points during my talk today. Probably this is one of the first big step we're going to see is the introduction of DWI to detect, for example, ischemic changes. Here there was an animal model, and you can see that DWI can immediately see already 45 minutes after the ischemic event that is already some clearly changes, while if you look at the T2 effect, you need to wait for hours to start to maybe guess some of the changes. But the main result of this series of experiments was mostly, it was not this paper, it was another paper come out on the same year, and it was about anisotropy. It was the fact that for the first time, when you were doing this experiment on ischemic, depending which direction you apply the diffusion gradient, you're actually getting different contrast. You can clearly see something that looks like on the frontal aslant tract here. It was kind of very bright white matter band here, and it's completely dark here. This is exactly the same position in the brain, but we are looking at diffusion on different direction. And that was kind of the big thing that diffusion gave us for the first time. We were able to set the microstructure organization and directionality of tissue in vivo. And just to explain very briefly, so with diffusion, and in general, when we do diffusion MRI, we are looking at a full three-dimensional process, okay? So diffusion itself is not a scalar measure. It's not looking at like pressure or T2 value. Depending the direction you measure, you can get different results. Of course, some of the tissue are very isotropic, and you get all the same value regardless of the direction you choose. But there are other directions like this one, other tissue like this one that, depending where you measure, you get completely different result. For example, along the fiber, this is clearly a picture or electron microscopy picture of white matter. You can see that water is more free to move randomly. This is not a flow, it's more random movement along the direction of the fiber. And with this, as I said, we actually start to crack kind of the challenge to start to see white matter in the brain. And before going to tensor, I added here a little bit of more history. There have been different attempts to try to see white matter fiber even before DTI. For example, here we have a paper from Mark Dorn, and he's using simply lesion and DWI anisotropy, and you can actually identify, for example, stroke and a degeneration of a tract and some kind of agenesis or corpus callosum, etc. Then and we are talking about 1990, so pretty much at the same time as Mosley. And in 1992, we have someone actually starting to suggest how to do neurography of the arm. For example, using DWI, you can see the white spot. These are the nerve inside the arm. Again, nothing to do with tractography, but this is just the beginning of starting to see white matter. So again, we are looking at pathways. We are not looking at endpoints. And this is probably the first time we found the term MR tractography. This is from a Japanese journal, and then it's been translated, I think, by ChatGPT on the left side. There is a lot of text in Japanese on the right side, what they were doing, again, it was not about DTI. It was a DWI perpendicular to the expected direction of the fiber, and then you just do a maximum intensity projection map. And in theory, you should get the average directionality of the tract. So in this case, they're trying to visualize most of the corticospinal tract. So again, not a problem, not discussing the quality of the methods, but this was the first time we have the term MR tractography, and surprise, surprise, also the first time we have the term MR tractogram. And this was 1993, the year before the tensor. And yeah, so we are coming from different way. And okay, in the 1994, we have okay, the introduction of diffusion tensor image from Peter Basser, Jane Matteo, Denis Bian. And they were, for the first time here, we have probably the second major inflection point in the study white matter connectivity, because now not only we have a three-dimensional model of water, but we can actually see the directionality of, we can actually model the directionality of the microstructure. So with the tensor that can be represented by this ellipsoid, you can have three eigenvalues that give you the shape of the tensor. So you can get FA, mean diffusivity, usual maps that you use for your analysis. But you also get three eigenvectors, which most of the time, if we look at the first one, the principal eigenvector, the maximal diffusivity. And you can see that by following directional maximum diffusivity, you can ideally develop the tractography. And do you want to see the first tractography picture in history? I found even that. There it is. Well, if I can change the slide. There we go. This is Van Vedin in 1995. This is the beautiful tractography. But this is the first, as far as we know, this is not just me, also Kurt Schilling did a lot of work looking for the first tractography picture. And we think this probably is the first picture of a real tractography, as we mean using tensor, etc. And already at the time we were doing pretty picture. Already the first visualization is already stereoscopic with the left and right. So, but yeah, this is the abstract from SMR in 1995, and if you look at the paper, there is not just one tractography algorithm. There are two. He even suggests two different ways to do the same kind of job. And this was 1995, and guess what? Just 7 years later, in 2002, we're already talking about virtual and vivid dissection. That's the big jump in technology. Tractography, DTI tractography really exploded in few years, really. And now, starting from a seeding point, starting from we can follow the principal eigenvector, and we can apply different tractography algorithms using Runge-Kutta, Euler, etc., different methods. And what we're getting with some also cleaning necessary, can get reconstruction that are very close match what we can see for postmortem dissection, like, for example, the Klinger dissection here. And DTI is quite straightforward. You have a tensor field, a vector field to follow. You put some constraint, like, for example, an FA map, so any white matter mass to constrain the tractography within the brain. You don't want to go outside that usually. And also you put a threshold also on the angle, because you don't want to change. You want to see the major track, this smooth reconstruction. You want to do very sharp trajectory. And if you do that, you can pretty much get most of the white matter pathway that I was mentioned before, the neuroanatomy of the 18th, 19th century, they're discussing. The big difference is down here we have postmortem dissection, and on the top here we have something that, looking at the protocol like that, can be done in 2 or 3 minutes scan and few second processing. So the improvement is clearly major. And now we have a tool that can reconstruct, even with all the limitation. Don't worry, I'm not skipping, not putting the bad things under the carpet. I'll go back to that. But already we can see the major portion of the tracks can be reconstructed with DTI, and we are pretty close to what we've been describing in the past. So that's a good starting point. But the other big thing that tractography can do is that it can actually generate customized atlases, or can actually follow the individual anatomical variability. And this is just a slide I created a few years ago while preparing a multi-center study. We wanted to see how reproducible was the tractography approach across different sites. So we send around 3 what we call traveling aides, that usually PhD student or master student, they have volunteered to travel, and we obtained this quite interesting result. You can see 3 different subjects with 3 different kind of sides of the arcuate, and although there are some minor difference, pretty much the track is always the same across the 3 different scans. 2 were GE, 1 was Siemens, but there is something, again, maybe there is also, this maybe as an artifact, but even the artifact is reproducible across sites. So we are able to capture something unique with tractography. And if you do that, then of course you can start to study, look at interactional variability, look and correlate with volume, FA, mean diffusivity, etc. And here we have, for example, the study from Stephanie a few years ago about using the anatomy itself as a predictor of recovery from aphasia, for example. So we can look at anatomy as a new variable to introduce in our prediction. And of course, the main application today of tractography is clinical application is neurosurgical planning. Few years ago, remember there was a lot of discussion SMRM and the HBM, etc. If tractography is ready or not to be applied in clinic. I think today we passed this point. Today we are at a point that it's not if it's good or not for clinical application. The question is how can we make it better? Now there are so many software already, commercial software with the certification, and neurosurgeons use it. And some people are still very critical, and some people are very optimistic, and they can clearly say we see an improvement, because clearly the alternative is just to see white matter and gray matter on a structural image. Here, instead, we actually see something. It's not perfect, but something that get close to the real anatomical organization. And of course, and now we talk about the problems. And this is the, sorry, I need a bit of water. And this is the way usually I present tractography problem. Because when we do tractography, we are like a train. We follow step by step each eigenvector or whatever model diffusion we use. And sometimes we go in the wrong direction or we don't stop in time. And these are the typical results we're getting. We got the main track by a lot of spurious, a lot of loops going around, or you can also get a lot of wrong connection with cortical, pons cortical, or something like that, that we know anatomically are not realistic, but still mathematically they are. So one important thing to remember of tractography is we are never looking at real axon or even fiber or band. What we're looking at is a mathematical reconstruction of the diffusion information, so the mobility of water molecule at a 2 or 1 millimeter scale. And sometimes the correct mathematical reconstruction might not be the real anatomical reconstruction. So this is something that at the moment is a big limitation we need to take into account. And thinking about well, there is no time to discuss all the possible things that can go wrong with tractography, but clearly the main challenge that was for many years around the 2000, 2010 was to try to solve the limitation of the tensor, so go beyond the DTI, beyond the tensor. There was a big field there where actually I spent most of my PhD time. And as you can see in this picture, the tensor is pretty good to model the single fiber orientation. For example, here when you have single fiber, a homogeneous group of fiber, you can see the displacement profile of the fusion propagator is pretty well characterized by the tensor. But when you have a crossing fiber, you can see the tensor will always be an ellipsoid. So you can stretch it, squash it as you like, but you're not going to have multiple peaks. It's going to be always an ellipsoid. So the direction maximum diffusivity is not anymore the direction of the real fiber. So you get artifact, you get streamline stopping the deep white matter or going the wrong direction. And that's the reason why. How bad is this limitation? This was for many years, people would say, yeah, just a few regions here and there. But the reality is that now we know that between 70 to 90% of the white matter voxel have this kind of artifact. And 70 to 90% have this kind of crossing fiber configuration. And you can see in this one map we developed a few years ago, you can see now that the only region essentially without crossing fiber is the body of the corpus callosum, and this little dot here, which are the core of the corticospinal tract. Everywhere else in the brain, this kind of dark, so light gray, is with at least 2 fiber crossing, and the white line is actually 3 or more. So yes, there are a lot of fiber crossing we need to take into account in our analysis. And how we do that? Now, usually we run our workshop and it takes 1 hour only to talk about that next slide. So I'll try to make it as efficient as possible. But the idea is that we need something else. We need to move from the ellipsoid visual information to what we call orientation distribution function. So which is kind of, again, it's a spherical function, but instead of having a single peak, now you can have multiple peaks. And there are 2 different types. You can have the diffusion orientation distribution function that try to capture somehow the displacement profile of the water molecules, and you get this kind of smooth profile. This is what you normally get with DSI, cube body imaging, the DOT. But there is another family called that gives us the fiber orientation distribution function, FODF, which is normally obtained with spherical deconvolution methods. And as you can see here, the objective we are trying to recover is not the blurring of the water molecule, the displaced water, but is the underlying orientation of the actual fiber. And if you want to do tractography, that's what you want. You want to follow the fiber, not just the diffusion. And if you want to understand why, or more in detail, with all this kind of selection and kind of deciding why FODF is better, I suggest you to look to a review we did a few years ago with Donald Tournier on how to model white matter with spherical deconvolution. I think there's a lot of useful information for everyone that want to understand more why we're using it as the in tractography. And just to give you an example, now here you can see that our tensor, you can see ellipsoid is kind of more like a Smarty fields. And you don't really see anything more than the general orientation. For example, you have the corpus callosum going up, and then there is a little bit of smooth fiber, but you cannot really see fiber crossing or going anywhere else. When you start to use spherical deconvolution, now you start to see 2 or 3 fiber orientation. Now you can see fiber crossing from the external capsule. And now you can see lateral projection, corpus callosum. You can see some green dot here of the SLF. You can see U-shaped fiber in the single. So you start to see more than one dominant fiber orientation. And if you apply that to tractography algorithm, you can actually see, let me see if we can start. Yes, you can start to see a little bit more in terms of anatomy. You can start to see clearly the lateral projection of the corpus callosum, but you can also start to see some of the artifacts you see before now disappear with this approach. And what is interesting, compared also to other methods, spherical deconvolution is actually very easy in a sense of acquisition, because you can just need to go a little bit higher in p-value, be 1500, 2000, or 3000. You don't need big 6000, 8000, like, I don't know, cube body imaging or DSI. And that's why also another reason why I think it get adopted very easily over the year. But as this is not only useful for corpus callosum or commissura fiber, it's also used to see trials that were difficult to visualize before. For example, here we have the SLF, and with Michel, we were able to visualize for the first time in human, the 3 segments of the SLF. They were described in the past in the monkey, and someone tried to describe the SLF3 with using DTI, but as there is no way you can see SLF1 and SLF2. The reason is very simple. SLF1 and 2 are not the dominant component. Here you have the callosal fiber going up, the corticospinal trap going up, all the corona radiata. So the associative component is the secondary component, it's not the first. So that's why you don't see with normal DTI. And of course, then we correlate also with the fMRI, electrophysiology, etc. And we found a good correspondence, not only with animal, but also with clinical data. But the big kind of other improvement that these advanced models, spherical deconvolution, when I talk spherical deconvolution, I'll talk about generic, could be CSD from MRTrix or Richard Solusi from Star Trek or different other approach. The main benefit of this approach is actually we start to see secondary, tertiary, and more component. And the first thing we noticed that started to emerge were all the intralobar connectivity, U-shaped fiber. And for example, we start to look better. Although the frontal tract was visible, we also with DTI, we start to better define the frontal tract, more U-shaped fiber. And we can start to look, for example, the hand knob of the hand region. And then we move to the parietal, and now we started to do some kind of interesting comparative anatomy study, because now we have a tool that can be applied both to human and monkey anatomy. And in this case, we're rhesus monkey. And we can, for example, find similarity and differences between the parietal lobe connectivity with tractography. And one of the kind of mantra in our lab is always being try to get anatomy right first, and then you can apply it for clinical application. And after that, we move to, for example, with the Valeria Parlandini to look at SLF and visual spatial attention in ADHD. Then we look at frontal brain aphasia, sorry. And then we also look at SMA and neurosurgery with Francesco Gargani, and we did a few papers on neurosurgical application, etc. So we always try to make sure that the pathway are the real one, the one that make sense. We're not just looking at, yeah, we see this is this main connectivity. And talking about Francesco, these are the couple of papers we did. Here we have the validation of the track, because one thing is to see the track, one thing is making sure that is actually what we see is not an artifact. And for example, we see some of the U-shaped fiber around the hand region. We can also see the frontal line track here. And of course, we also, in another paper, we also look at the subgenual region for kind of making a sort of mini atlas for deep brain stimulation. And for example, you can see here the fiber going from the accumbens to the front, from the orbital cortex. And yeah, so this kind of what we see in tractography, we're able to see with Klinger dissection. And I think if I have a more pretty visualization, but I can always say, well, we can see here, we can actually start to see, you can see also in postmortem dissection. So in a way, even with all the limitations, there are still also in spherical deconvolution is definitely not the perfect method. We still need to improve a lot of things, but we are improving when we start to see getting closer and closer to what should be we expect to see the real anatomy. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is another possible point of inflection where I think we are still working on it. I think in a way that probably just now people started to use it more and more. And specifically, I'm referring to the moving from the voxel matrix, FA diffusivity, to more track-specific information. In our group, we talk about orientational isotopy, HMOA, or other group in the matrix talking about apparent fiber density, fiber capacity, etc. But the idea is essentially is kind of the same. The idea is to look and realize that when you look at spherical deconvolution and we look at FOD, changes in one fiber bundle is not affecting the other fiber. So essentially, you have absolute measure or a proxy of the underlying fiber density. So if something changes one direction, it's not supposed to change the other one. On the contrary, if you look at the tensor, things are a little more complicated because all the tensor is changing, because the tensor is just the average of everything's going on in the voxel. So I think a little bit more and more this is going to be more used. And for example, if you're familiar with the matrix, you have pixel analysis. This is directly derived by this concept, and other methods are also coming as well. And just to give you a quick example here, for example, if you map the FA in a region of crossing, you can clearly see that FA goes down because the tensor is just average two different directions and FA goes down. But if we look at the orientation isotopy or the amplitude FOD, clearly different fiber can have different amplitude. Imagine, for example, here a healthy corticospinal tract crossing a pathological arc fasciculus in the same region. Now we can separate this kind of information. And few papers I've used, for example, we have done a study looking at anatomical specificity of some track, for example, related to reading, and of course, come out with all the language network was involved. Well, before, if we're looking at the TI metric, we're also involving, the corpus callosum, the splenium. And more recently, we also look at how the orientation isotopy can be correlated, is inversely correlated with the TMS excitability threshold in glioma, in the corticospinal tract. So you need a higher threshold to stimulate the CST. And when you do that, you actually see there is a decrease in the HMA. So this is a sort of biomarker that can predict how the TMS will perform during surgery, for example. And this is everything is nice and good, but as I said, there are problems, okay? And we need to be honest with where the problem today, what are the main challenge. The main problem, I think, today is that already being identified in 2015 when we had and then 2017 when the paper came out with the tractography challenge. And here what people did create a synthetic data set based on real tractography dissection, 20 well-known track, and they generated a synthetic data set. And what happened, and then I asked people to dissect and see how close we are to the expected gold standard. The results were quite interesting because, as you can see, almost all the group managed to get 23 to 25. So everyone managed to get the real track. But the main issue, and was kind of, we know it was bad, but we didn't know it's so bad. We got almost 4 wrong track for every good track dissected. So 75% of connection, if you do completely automatic without any cleaning or editing, are really spurious. And you might think, oh, wow, this is just random noise. I can average, I can remove it. But actually, if you look at this track, they looks real. And it's very difficult to average them out. If you average them out, you keep getting this kind of, because how the geometry of the brain is organized, the sulci, the gyri, and also different opening, you have this track. And also look here, we have the IFOF, which intentionally was not put into the data set when we generate it. And we are able to dissect again the IFOF beautifully, even if it was not there, probably because the solution was a little bit decreased, there was a bit of noise. So this is the joining probably of the ILF and the ancine or something like that. But still, it was kind of the beginning of what we call today the winter of tractography, because like we have a winter for AI, we also have winter tractography. And for some time, people say, okay, now what can we do with connectomics? Because connectomics, as I said at the beginning, is mostly based to look at the termination point, but we don't really looking at the actual pathway. So you can see two regions connected by something that is not really anatomically. And someone, for example, Gong in Cerebral 2009, published try to visualize the validity of some of the connection. When this is something like 88 or 50 by 50 region, you can still try to do it. But when you go to parcellation like 500 by 500, good luck to validate each connectivity. So that is becoming a major challenge. So as I said, it was a big deal for some time. And people think, should we give up on tractography? Should we stop? And but as usually, when you have a moment of crisis, is actually the good time to develop new idea. And among the different ideas, this is not the only one. There are, for example, we have come out with this kind of global tractography approach. We have, for example, COMIC2, where you can actually filter the streamline base, how well the whole tractogram is explaining back your measure. Normally, when you do tractography, you have your data set, you get your streamline, you do your dissection, and that's it. Or you do your connectivity matrix, and that's it. But one thing you can do is kind of apply a feedback loop. So you can look at the streamline and see, or in group of bundle, in the case of COMIC2, and see how the different bundles are explaining well the original signal. And according to this paper, you can see the true fibers are filtered, but not too much, while really bad artifacts are almost removed. So I think this result a little bit optimistic, because we got some improvement for sure, but we didn't get exactly the same kind of level of cleaning. Probably we don't know how to use exactly the tool, but we are now working with Daducci and the group, and we try to combine more neuroanatomical prior together with this technique to see if we can actually further improve. So this is definitely an improvement. And what really convinced me that it is actually a good direction to go is, for example, when they started from deterministic and probabilistic tractography, it's quite impressive how you get the same filter connectivity matrix at the end. That was the first time, wow, maybe we are converging to something that might be close to the anatomy. So that's one thing. Other big things I've been doing over time has been the work on, of course, different automatic tractography, automatic segmentation. So you have clustering, segmentation, different approach. And more recently, we also have deep learning coming to the game. We have this kind of TrackSeg or other software available. They're using deep learning and AI to try to dissect this track. These methods are improving a lot. And I think we started to use ourselves in our lab for some studies. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that all these methods need some training data, and they need the pre-existing knowledge. So you can use this software for the existing 20, 30 tracks that they've been trained. But if you want to apply on a new track, you kind of can't, unless you train your software yourself and you train to do automatically. So we are getting there, but there is still work to do. And we try to help in this direction. And this is something that I was hoping to give you today. I was telling to Steffi before, giving you today the bioarchive link to download the paper. But fortunately, I've been traveling too much in the last couple of weeks, so I didn't manage to submit yet the paper. But here it is. We introduced the concept of megatrack. The idea is quite simple, and other people have already done some similar work to this one. But So the idea is very simple. So we normalize streamline to a template space using the normal transformation you get in your structural data. And then you apply some filter. You can filter to demographic, you can filter to anatomy, and then you end up with a mega track data set. You can manually dissect and do your own dissection, but when you do dissection, this time you're not dissecting anymore one subject. You're dissecting potentially 200 or even 1,000 subjects in one go. It will take a little bit longer than dissect a single subject, of course, because now in one go you get all the possible artifacts you have from all the subjects. So you need to take some time. But I can tell you, I was able to replicate a study that took 6 months to a PhD student to dissect 200 brain in 40 minutes. Because now 40 minutes for a track is a lot, but you've done it. When you do it, you don't have to go back to anymore. And the benefit is when you do this dissection, you are able now to go back to the native streamline and extract the value. So FA, mean diffusivity, track volume, etc., like you've done the dissection in native space. So we have done some, we have been working on this for quite a few years now. There is no doubt about that. But we changed a lot over the year. Initially, it was just the idea of registering all the streamline in MNI. Now we have a full framework. We have a website, and I'm going to show you in a second. And when we compare with different data sets, we found, for example, a clear increase in interoperability. So different users getting much closer to when they dissect in this way, because clearly now you're always dissecting the same MNI anatomy, and it's easy to come to an agreement, decide how to dissect the chart in different way. And easily, if you have a disagreement, you can have a chat and go back and do dissect again. Before, it was kind of impossible to go back and redo again 200 track one by one. The next thing it was also useful is to, in terms of longitudinally, because now you can concatenate the same subject, all the different time points, and you can dissect in the same way the same subject, because you're essentially dissecting only one time the anatomy. And we've seen a clear increase a significant increase in ICC in this sense. And I think it would be a good way to, for example, for longitudinal study. And just to give an example, if before when MSc student in King's were dissecting 30 to 60 month section, now a couple of years, well, with more than a couple of years ago, we already able to dissect 12,000 stringer, because now you can multiply by 200 subject, by X number of direction, X number of track, left and right, etc. So we can actually generate a lot of track. And of course, and this gives us a lot of tracks that can be now used to train deep learning tool, train atlases and if application. Just to give an example in terms of performance, you can see here a comparison of manual dissection versus megatrack dissection. You can clearly see literally how close are the dissection. And this is not surprise, because these are exactly the same streamline. The only difference is one is being extracted by one by the user. The other one is being extracted automatically by megatrack. On the top, you have the DTI, and the bottom, you have the spherical deconvolution for the single. And you can see also in terms of precision, in terms of matrix, you're very close, the overlapping is very close. And one thing we realized that even when you have an artifact like that, like for example, a little random spurious streamline, the effect on the main FA or management is quite small, because the core of the track is actually what is driving most of the quantitative matrix. Of course, it's affecting the volume, etc. But in terms of quantitative matrix, we notice that one or two streamline going a little bit crazy is not that detrimental for the quantitative measure. Now, as I said, because now you can dissect the track, we can easily generate, and everything can go back and forth from MNI to native space. You can generate population-based atlases, because now you can customize based on age, based on sex, based on different subpopulation, and you can generate these kind of atlas very, very quickly. And we've done that, and I don't know if you're familiar, but we already have a website where you can actually test, select different kind of selecting criteria, visualize different track. You can also correlate, see what kind of cortical region are connected. We also have a lesion analysis tool for that. But I'm just play around. This is, as you can see here, I don't know if it's clear beta. So go there, crack it, crash it, and then tell me what is not working, and we're going to fix it. And that's where we are at the moment. And just to give you an example, this megatrack's been so long in development, and we have already 4 or 5 papers already published using the technique. This is just one, for example, from Ahmad, when we discussing the mold is a good example. For example, here you can see the mold is clearly not available almost any template or automatic tool. So if you want to look at this track, you cannot end up to have to do manually one by one, or you can use Megatron. That's what Ahmad did. Now, this was a kind of a quick overview of what we have been doing in our lab, also with the working collaborator with Michelle and Steffi over the year. Now, I would like to talk a little bit very quickly in the few minutes I have left about the handbook of tractography. This has been a big job that it took the last few years of my life. And let's start with a bit of history. This started kind of few years before, even before, when the OGBM educational session, the educational course on diffusion imaging from 2014 to 2019, we started with Hamburg, Geneva, Honolulu, Vancouver, Rome. And what we did at the time was to come out with some kind of a complete program of lecture on how to get your measure right with diffusion MRI. We follow kind of a pipeline, starting from acquisition, pre-processing, analyzing, data extraction, etc. And we invited probably the usual suspect of the diffusion community. So we have Carla Miller, Alex Lehman, Tim Derby, Gary Zhang, Manisha Hagwal, Eleftherio, etc. So it was quite nice. It was quite fun. And it went well for a few years. So we got, I think, 5 years. It was a good experience. And then we got approached by Elsevier, and they asked me, what do you think is next in the field? What is needed next in the field? And immediately I said, well, there is nothing about tractography. We need an handbook of tractography. So they are suggested to apply. I joined with Alex and Max Lecoteau, Alex Lehman and Maxime Lecoteau, and we started to work on this book. And then it was 2020, and as you know, in 2020 it was a little bit of a distraction for many of us. So yeah, we got COVID first, and it was definitely not a good time for many people. But there was also a good, in 2010, there was also a good distraction for me because Gabriel arrived. So I would be very happy to spend time with him. And I was a bit slow in writing on the paper, on the book. But then by 2022, finally, we managed to get the first early draft revision. And I can tell you, at that time, we say it's done. It's coming out in the next couple of months. And as you can see, 2024, well, Gabriel grew up in the meantime, and the book now is ready, finally, after a few years. I'm not going to say what we did from 2020 to 2024, because, yeah, he's managing a lot of author communication, working on the chapter, took a lot of time, definitely more than I was expecting, but I think we did a good job. Hopefully, that's my impression, but well, let's see. You will tell me if you like it or not. But the idea was to create a book for everyone. So it's not specific for MRI person or clinician. Is literally, we try to have a little bit of for everything, for everyone. And yeah, you can actually pick and choose whatever you are more interested in. And again, the structure is again the same. We started from acquisition, pre-processing, modeling, tracking, analyzing, and application. So you can actually follow along depending what you want to do. Little bit of number, we have 5 sections, 33 chapters, 750 pages, and more than 100 authors. So that is, yeah, it took quite a while to get it sorted. And the last news is that if Amazon is not changing the date, tomorrow should be out for everyone to have a look if you want. Then, yeah, this is a clearly incomplete list of the authors. We try to call many experts for different fields. We got a very good response. Everyone was excited to contribute to this book. And here, just very quickly, you can see, as I said before, we go for anatomy, diffusion, tractography, streamline to track and tractography application. As I said before, I have extra slide if you want in the question section to show you later more detail about the different chapters. I'm happy to go through more slides later. But one thing we realized with this book was definitely tractography is a big field now, and it's definitely multidisciplinary and is a complex field. You cannot do as a single expertise. You can definitely not thrive well if you just want to do everything by yourself. You definitely need to collaborate. And at the same time, we will start wondering, do we have already critical mass to create our own space? And that was the next step that happened. So even before finishing the book, we already started to work on something else. And that's what's happened. So we put together what we call, now is named in the International Society for Tractography. We had the first retreat in March this year to invite 50 experts in the field, but also outside the field, because we wanted to not just do a copy of SMRM, HBM. We want to have a completely different field, neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, MR physicist, mathematician, etc., to discuss together, see what is needed. And this is kind of a picture of all the committee. We had a lot of fun. It was a very nice place. It was very nice to have a debate on the open and drinking coffee on the other side. That was really nice. And this is the final result at the moment. We have launched in June the International Society for Tractography. You can reach the website with tractography.io. And the good news is we try to be different as much as we can and as long as we can as well compared to other societies. So the registration for now and until any decision is taken will be free. And we try and we're fighting to keep it free as long as we can. Because unfortunately, as you know, there are costing at some point we need to cover, but we have planned to try to find sponsor and maybe a registration to event and conference to cover it. So as long as at the moment, we are trying to stay free. We already virtual meeting, you can register. So there are talk about tractography. At the moment, are a little more technical, but I think the community of the clinical is perfect if you want to join. It also you want to give lecture. We need clinical input, we need neuroscience input. Tractography is not a property of mathematician or MR physicist. So you definitely need to tell us what is needed the most. And this is something we're planning to for writing grant, having training networks across different sites. And yeah, hopefully we're getting there. And just to give you an idea, this is the number we already had. So in a few months from the launch, we already have 450 members already subscribed. And concluding now this lecture with actually announcing now that it's been approved by the high level of the society, that now we already have the first meeting of the International Society for Tractography will be on the 13th and 16th of October in Bordeaux, France, and will be organized by Michel, Steffi, Laurent Petit. So as you can see, we are all friends. we are having fun, and we keep talking about tractography. And I want to close with this. This is something I was thinking today. We're also reflecting about what I was talking about my lecture. So if there is one thing you need to remember about this lecture, remember this. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Flavio. That was a beautiful run through from the early days to exciting new developments. And I want to open the floor to questions. Anyone dares to go first? Let me just check. There's also the possibility to write questions online that I'm happy to bring into the room. And there's no one brave enough just yet. Let me go first. So, oh, Mish, is that your hands up?
Yeah, my computer got updated and I can't find the button to raise my hand. So you spoke about this filtering with commit on producing the tractography and then checking whether like the tractography that is produced can actually explain the original data. If the false positives are coming from problem of resolution, I mean, it's a bit circular, no? Don't you think?
Yeah, well, I think there is one thing we don't do with photography, as I said, we don't go back and check if the whole 100,000 of streamline are, sorry, let me remove the volume. A million of streaming generated.
Sorry, Mish,
They
can you
match
mute yourself while
together.
Flavio's talking?
Sorry?
Here we go. Now the background noise has gone.
Okay. So we're saying sorry, I just lost the, what I was saying. Yeah, so the main thing is when you do methods like Comet, you try to explain the signal back. But the thing, the power is that normally when you propagate tractography, you do one streamline at a time, and you don't care about the existence of a nearby streamline with you. So each streamline lives on its own, okay? When you do global tractography, you evaluate the presence of all the streamline together for the first time, and you try to see what is the total weight of all the bundle of streamline to explain the original signal. So you have to make a decision globally, not just locally, globally, what is the most likely track to exist. Now, mathematically, this is a nightmare because you are talking about millions of streamline to evaluate millions of voxel. And that's why the version of Comet and SIFT, etc., for me, were not really getting to the point because the solution space was too big and they were stuck in some kind of local minimum. They were not converging. But with Comet 2, the novelty is to not look at individual streamline, but to group before with kind of realistic bundle. They don't have to be individual track, the full track, just small bundle. In this case, now you're evaluating not anymore million of streamline for million of voxel, but is 1,000 of bundle with millions of voxel. Now, from the mathematical point of view, you have a much more strong constraint to ask the software to converge to something that we hope, we don't have the guarantee, that is the real anatomy. Now, the difference in terms of performance between the first generation to the second generation is pretty big. Is already ready to be used? Personally, I don't think so yet. I think there is something need to be add more to make sure that we are really removing all the artifacts. There are still a lot of artifacts before coming. That there is, I don't even talk with Alessandro will tell you, yes, there are still. But is a step forward in this direction to remove almost automatically something that should not be there. But I can confirm that it's not circular. There is a,
Okay. Because you remember this other software, Life, that was doing the same kind of thing and demonstrating 10 years ago, maybe 15, I don't know, that probabilistic tractography was better because you could better explain the original signal with probabilistic tractography. And I think one of the main comment I said was like, well, if your model actually is also showing noise and your data have noise, you can like predict it back better. That doesn't mean the anatomy is better. Because that's not the problem here.
I agree with you. At the time, as I said, Life, I think it was working again on one stream for, so I don't think there is enough power to converge to a realistic solution. In this case, the big novelty here is that we are just trying to converge bundles. And so essentially, we are trying to simplify the problem. Hopefully, we have a PhD student working on this. We're trying to submit an abstract, possibly also for Bordeaux, see how it goes, if we can improve the performance. And there are some collaboration I have with the Ducci, because, for example, if we know some of the track are real, we can potentially impose some anatomical, say, the corticospinal track has to be like that. Now deal with the rest. So you can remove something, but for example, you have some quite strong a priori fixed, then you can reject clearly something that should not be there. So we still try. I mean, this is clearly led by the Ducci group, and they're trying different. For example, now they're trying to move away from streamline to kind of big tubes, like have a weight of kind of a size, not just. So also to take that into account, etc. But there is a lot. Like, I mean, as I said, this is one of the many attempts we are trying now to break the limitation of tractography.
Thank you. I'm afraid I have to go. I have to pick up my son, but I can't wait to catch up with you again and discuss all those things. Thank you so much for the talk.
Eduardo has a question as well.
Yeah, so maybe it's a clarification question, but you mentioned before that with the orientation density function compared to DTI, it's possible to maintain independence between the orientation. And I get why that does not happen with the diffusion tensor model, but could you maybe explain a little bit more why it is the
Okay,
case with
yeah.
it?
So, okay, the short answer, no, okay, I'm not going to say that because since then I'm doing advert for my book. But, so definitely you can read the review. The paper I was mentioning, the we did with Dr. Nies. This is actually we explain detail. But in short, you have to think about when you do spherical deconvolution, imagine you have two fibers. Now I need the donuts in there. You have two fibers, and each fiber can be represented by its own signal. The idea behind the spherical deconvolution is that, and we have some very strong biological validation for that, that the shape of the signal is very similar across different fiber bundle. So essentially, what you're doing when you do spherical convolution, the amplitude FOD is essentially the weight of the same fiber model, the same signal. Imagine this donut, I'll move around different direction, and the amplitude FOD is telling you how much fiber there is in different directions. So the presence of one direction is completely independent from the other one because it's dependent on the real orientation, underlying orientation of fiber. This is what we are doing with FODF. In the past, and that's where a source of confusion, people were doing cubal imaging on DSI were also used to normalize the ODF to their maximum. So the range was going from 0 to 1 all the time regardless. But with the spherical convolution, we do not normalize. The FOD, the integral of FOD is not a probability you always get to 1. The integral is proportional to the total fiber density within a voxel, okay? So is an absolute quantity. And it makes things, for me, more meaningful in the biophysical sense. It's not just a statistical present, because sometimes people say, oh, but it's a probability. It's not a probability. Is the real density in terms of absolute density.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I have a acquisition question for you before we move on to some questions on the application. So I listened to a talk yesterday by Steen Müller at Oxford, and he talked about the artifacts you introduce into the data due to breathing. And apparently that is a shift of about a quarter of a voxel. Now, I saw on your slide, and having worked with you, I know that you like to cardiac gate. So I was wondering if you could comment on the impact of cardiac gating and if we should do both or if one is more important than the other.
That's a good question. Okay. And we are definitely only the few of us, 10 people online, and nobody else on internet is listening clearly. Okay, great. So the thing is that I think cardiac gating is the main issue because there are due to brain pulsation, you have elastic deformation of the brain. Ventricle get bigger, or even the splenium. There is a video I can dig up from Derek Jones. You can just see the splenium moving like that. There are some pulsation on the level of the cerebellum. Sometimes you have a complete signal loss. So the motion is quite severe. Unfortunately, I think there are only 2 or 3 sites in the world actually doing cardiac gating to take care of this. I think it's NIH, KCL, and mostly side with GE machine, because in GE it's very easy to set up the cardiac gating. On Siemens, on Philips, I tried many years when I was in Italy. On Philips, it was a challenge. I don't know if things are better now. People try to kind of assume that, okay, I'm using eddy, top up, or repol, and I can reject any dropout of the signal. That is fine for a signal dropout, but when you have a geometrical deformation, I'm not entirely sure you can completely clean that. So, but I don't know if you remember many years ago, the talk from Adam Anderson at King, when he presented about eddy, say, at the end of the day, we spend 10 years to get eddy to pop a line, and then it's impressing how just processing the raw data, how good is the fiber and the tensor anyway. So at the end, you have to think about, you have so much data, you're averaging a lot. Anyway, some of the imperfection here and there get canceled out anyway. But the point is, you want to be the best you can to get rid of all these additional error you can remove if you can. Because at the end of the day, what you want, you have a very sensitive matrix to quantify and to do your statistics. So if you leave this amount of error here and there, they might contribute at some point. There is not a hard threshold, yes or no. I think it's you should try to be your best as much as you can, because then you're going to have more sensitivity in your map. In terms of respiratory, I really need to want to see the data, because if we are always using extra padding when fixing the head, and the head should not move that much, I don't know if there is actually internal motion due to breathing. I don't know, but a quarter voxel movement usually is taken care very well by motion, by Eddie. But I don't know. Maybe she's talking of something I don't know, and now tomorrow I'm going to tell you, oh, this is the most important correction we have to do. I don't know. I don't think I'm confident. But for my experience so far, if you can do cardiac gating, yes. I know many people don't do, but I know. That's why I would like that everyone doing it, but I know it's not going to happen.
It takes a little bit longer to acquire the data, right?
Yes, that's it, but I think the improvement in speed with the multiband now is pretty good. Now you can do, I don't know, 120 directions, less than 10 minutes or something. And yeah, maybe you can just do one shot less, and you can do the same with cardiac gating. But I agree with you again. Maybe averaging is enough. Yeah, one thing is the theory, one thing is the practice. Remember also the clinical problem. Usually you want the answer quickly, you want the answer yesterday, and something like that. So you need to make some compromise.
Yeah. That is a nice segue into the question that we have online, which is one fundamental question and one application question, which is, what do you think about what the HMOA index reflects, and could HMOA reflect brain reorganization, for example, after a brain lesion?
Ooh, okay, so HMOA essentially is a sec. In the first assumption, you can consider it as a proxy of fiber density in one direction. But if you want a more close representation to the tensor, you can imagine you have a different fiber, and each fiber has its own tensor. The HMOA will be the FA in a way of each individual fiber. So we can have a different. I call HMOA for different reasons, and one of the reason is that we have orientation is indirect modulated orientation disorder. This is the full name, which is very mouthful, and I don't like it, but that's the way it is. Is that I prefer to consider more like an anisotropy, because it's not only the fiber density that matter. You can also measure the axial diffusivity of the radial diffusivity of each individual fiber. So as a DTI, in a way, as a FA, many factor might affect the final amplitude. Now, going back to your question, can HMOA be sensitive to plasticity? It really depends, because, as I said, many factors might affect anisotropy. So if you remember the juggling study, they found changes in FA. So at the same level, I would say yes. Then if it's change FA, probably we're going to change also HMOA. But if you really tell me there is a complete rewiring of white matter, I don't know. I don't know how much is rewiring, how much is simply synaptic remodeling. Basically, the white matter stay the same. So this is something probably neurobiologists will tell. We can know more than that. I don't know about that. But in principle, if you see some changes in FA, you should see some change in HMOA.
Valentina has a question for you.
Yeah, hi. It's a question regarding the filtering. And I was wondering, does it work only with average data, so group data, or also single acquisition?
Which filtering are you suggesting?
The last part of your presentation, the filtering of the
mega or the com?
Sorry?
You talk about the commit filtering or of the megatrack analysis?
The megatrack.
Okay, no. In the megatrack, we're talking, we don't average anything. We basically we transform all the stream from all subjects into MNI, and we concatenate them together. So instead, let's say you have 1 million streamer per subject, you have 20 subjects, you're going to have 20 million streamer at the end. Then you can apply some pre-filtering to it. If you know they're looking at the frontal lobe, you can discard the commissura, you can discard the tracks, or you do data reduction. But you're going to have all the streamer from all the subject inside your megatrack data set. So when you do dissection, you're not dissecting the average tractography. You're dissecting the individual tractography of all subjects in MNI at the same time. As I said, that is good because you can actually visually check that where are the artifacts, where are not the artifacts. And but it's going to take a little bit more time because in one go you get all the possible artifacts from all the subjects. So you need to spend a little bit more time to clean it.
Okay, thank you.
I can actually show you some data tomorrow, Flavio, because Eva did 200 participants manual and Megatrack to compare. And it's pretty good.
Okay, good.
I bring that data tomorrow and show you.
Okay, fantastic.
One more question online is, how can I help dementia patients and clinicians? And by it, I'm just assuming we're talking advanced tractography.
Well, I can tell you that Megatrack has been used, and also the lesion mapping tool from Megatrack has been used successfully in New Zealand. We have been working on the, what's the name? Well, let's say New Zealand Consortium for Alzheimer. Do you remember the CBR? Okay, no, CBR, well, I don't remember. Sorry. And then they actually show that the level of lesion overlapping with the different tracks actually increase very linearly also with the behavior. So you go from healthy control, subjective cognitive impair, mild cognitive impair, something else to remember than Alzheimer, and you actually see an amazing trend and a super high significant value. And I never see the results so clean because probably I think this is more than Megatrack is the large number. They have more than 500 brain collected across, I don't know, 10 years and different. So 500 multiplied by 10 or something like that. So you can actually see a lot of longitudinal data. And yeah, the data was very interesting. And again, we didn't actually dissect the track of the study. We used a atlas to overlap the lesion, and it worked very well. This is one way of doing it. So even if you don't, sometimes even if you don't have the tractography for your own data, you can actually see the degree of disconnection and something like that. Something similar probably you've done in the past with you and Michelle. And that's it.
Lovely. I don't see any more questions at the moment, and I'm aware of time. So I want to thank you again for joining us this afternoon and giving us a wonderful overview of tractography and the things to come. Excited to see the book tomorrow. So let's have a party for that one. And thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. Thanks everyone to be in the meeting or online, and see you for the next talk. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.